talking about because of the oval heavy nature. But last time we went racing at Mid-Ohio, I mean, chaos before we even got to the line. Jordan Caruso lit up the rear tires, and after that, 4, 5, 6 cars took damage, and from there, helter-skelter. We did get to see a bit of a battle, though on strategy. Those up front starting on the alternate compound of tire, some of those behind starting on the primaries, and you saw the mixers, they will work their way on through, but also damage. Ricardo Rico, Kenneth, really struggling after taking damage to the front wing in that early stage of the race.
Yeah, there were long-lasting damages from the opening lap crash. It took many drivers out of it. They had to rebound in the strategic sense, and when you were talking about the primaries versus the alternates, you know, there were a big spread of drivers that had to really push aggressively midway through the race because they had those red-walled alternate tires. They had to make up as much ground as possible. Guys like Sam Keitel were making power moves on the outside and just rummaging through the field because theoretically they had no other option, but it brought us fantastic racing. A look on the inside to Keitel there off of the keyhole, and plenty of other drivers making moves throughout the race. I think that's what made it so much fun, including Gustavo Ariel and his really interesting chase to the top 3.
He really pushed all the way to the very end, but a little bit too hard. He was on the alternate tires and trying to attack his teammates on the primaries, but unfortunately you saw the wiggle through turn 1. It allowed Eduardo Leo to break away. The first repeat winner of the season. He did it in the opening round of the championship at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's road course. And look at that list of winners since. And it really now leads us to these 3 ovals, interspersed with a trip to the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. And of course, let's not forget the fans. They had their say, Kenneth. The fan vote decided where we would go for round number 9, and I'm so excited to head to one of the most historic tracks in all of the world, the Milwaukee Mile, for 120 laps, building up to the championship finale.
And before the season even began, the drivers were preparing for each and every track they would encounter, but still up in the air on what that penultimate race would be. When the fans decided it was Milwaukee, then the teams have a little less time to adjust to the climate and what is going to encounter them at that point of the season. But a lot of change in the playoffs, or the point standing specifically, that fight for the championship. Arjuna, Jogo Pinto stole the points lead over Cooper Webster, who missed last week at Mid-Ohio, and Team Redline goes 1 through 5 in the standings. They are absolutely dominating. They've got a chokehold, but look at Phil Kraus and Robert Malechka, still ample opportunities to take control and weave their way into the podium for the championship with all of these ovals that are left.
Let's say Phil Kraus can win the remaining 3 ovals. That guarantees him a minimum of 30 points on the rest of the championship field. There's a lot still to play for. Talk us through, Kenneth, where we are today, the Worldwide Technology Raceway.
Well, it is, Arjuna, the only oval on the schedule that has different banking on either end of the racetrack. 11 degrees of banking in turns 1 and 2, 9 degrees of banking in 3 and 4, but the radius is different on either side. So you've got a tighter 1 and 2 where you've got to slow down a lot more versus a more wide open 3 and 4. This track is very low banked, which means lots of tire wear, specifically on the right front tire. This track clocks in at 1.25 miles, opened back in 1997. In this oval configuration, we were here in the qualifying series. Phil Kraus took the win. Maybe a trend that we're seeing with Phil Kraus in these ovals. He's the winner from Iowa earlier this season, so we'll keep an eye on that.
And clearly, for private label Team Hype, they identified the ovals. They knew the fan vote going the way of Milwaukee would favor them as well. We're in a really interesting place, of course, heading into this final stage. Let's talk championship prizes. The battle for $50,000, and the champion themselves will walk away with $20,000 in their pocket. But all the way down to 15th, there is money to play for. The top 12 retain their eligibility, their license for 2025 as well. Don't have to go through the grind. That is a qualifying series. We're ready to go, though. 108 laps on deck at the Worldwide Technology Raceway. Let's head down trackside, take a look at the starting grid, because there's a shock. It's Michael Romanidis. It's Kowanda on pole. Michele Costantini will line up alongside his teammate, trying to really control from the front. But keep an eye out for Rob Malechka, the double iRacing Indy 500 champion of 2024. Inside of newly minted double race winner this season, Eduardo Leo. Phil Kraus is alongside of Florian Lebiger on the 3rd row of the starting grid. Not much the margin splitting the drivers. Elliot Veyron and David Toth, 2,000ths between the two of them. Diogo Pinto, the championship leader, lines up alongside of Ricardo Rico to round out the top 10. And Jordan Caruso, hoping to put the disappointment of a week ago behind him. He's alongside of Gustavo Ariel once again with some work to do to charge his way forward. Cooper Webster missed last week testing for Macau, where he'll be racing in about a month's time. He's got Peter Berryman alongside him, though, with Josh Chin and Luke McEwen on row 8. Apex Racing team have some work to do to try and work their way forward. They were strong at Iowa. Let's see what they'll do here today. Sotomuto, Tamash Simone share row number 9 as they find themselves just inside of the top 20. Jeff Drake and Dan Amor share row number 10. Jaden Munoz and Javi Ross, two drivers that we have seen charge their way forward, start on row 11, but keep an eye behind them. Jacob Oster and Jason Brophy, no idea where they whiffed so badly on qualifying. They'll be quite disappointed. Only UC Katia is slower than them. Sam Coyton, Jose Soria, and Brendan Lichtenberg, the final drivers in this field, of course, as we wind our way to the closing stage of the season. A couple of drivers electing to miss these remaining rounds of the season, and we will talk more about that as we get through these 108 laps in front of us. Kenneth, the weather, though, it's relatively cool. We got some cloud cover to speak of as well.
Yeah, but the sun might peek out with this partly cloudy skies we have here in Madison, Illinois. The wind speed, though, keep an eye on that. That clocks in at 6 miles an hour to the west, so we may end up seeing handling changes depending on where you are on the racetrack. The track temp could, though, easily creep up. With a track as worn out as this is in Gateway, you definitely have opportunities for epic tire wear and lots of strategy calls down the line too.
Oh, and strategy has been quite interesting. Let's not forget what happened at Iowa, where Apex tried to save some fuel as we talk about our ButtKicker race analysis. Ran out 5 laps before the end. You don't want to do that in just this 135-mile affair that we've got. Tire's going to be somewhat important, you'd assume, given that we're racing in the daylight rather than under the night lights, under which sometimes they do compete here. And of course, the fireworks that sometimes precede the race as well. No tire set limits. We're not talking about 2 compounds of tires. We do have to keep an eye, though, on that pit road speed limit. It is slow, and Kenneth, it's so easy to make a mistake entering or exiting the lane.
And it is a very narrow lane, so if you overcook the entry just a little bit, you could easily wash out, and you do have a little bit of time before you get up to that pit wall with the barriers. But many times we'll see drivers make that fatal mistake where they will enter pit road, go a little wide, they'll hit that wall, and all of a sudden their race is over. So if we do end up with green flag stops, in the sense, we may end up seeing those little mistakes here and there. But as we've seen throughout the season and the oval races specifically, Arjuna, we've never really had to worry about green flag pit stops all that much. Lots of the cautions have helped in that.
Oh, we haven't finished an oval race, but under a green flag just yet. It's all being behind the safety car, and so we send it off and away and hope we don't have to see it much today. 108 laps, and here on Halloween, will it be trick or treat for the drivers in the INDYCAR ButtKicker iRacing Pro Series? Let's punch the throttle at the Worldwide Technology Raceway and look at Rob Malechka trying to get to the inside of Michele Costantini, also trying to block off Eduardo Leo. Thought there may have been contact for a second as Phil Kraus chops the nose off of Florian Labiga, running out of turn number 2 onto the back straightaway. Look at the fan out of drivers further behind.
And you're seeing everyone being aggressive early on, because since this track doesn't have a lot of banking to carry a lot of speed, you will encounter a lot of dirty air from the traffic in front of you. So your opportunities are kind of limited when you go deeper into the long run. So you'll see a lot of guys be aggressive, trying to go down to the inside, make the moves as quickly as they can. But it's not quite easy for Florian Labigra, side by side with Kraus in turn 3.
He was getting a bit of a draw from his teammate, now in turn feeding dirty air to the red line driver out through 3 and 4, but he uses the little bit more banking he's got down low and the confidence he had in that car. It bodes well for Redline and Kawanda that they're sitting strong at the start of this race and taking the fight to the private label Team Hype. I've also noted that the Apex Racing team, Berryman and McEwen, are trying to work together slightly further back in the field, but it is single file the further you go. Dirty air is going to play its part. These warmer temperatures seemingly something to keep an eye on as well. And Michael Romanidis crosses the line. 3 laps complete. He's led every lap so far.
And Romanidis has been on a hot streak. Think about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where he finished in second, given that race ended under caution. But him and his teammate Elliot Veyron had done so well to give them the track position late in the going, and then got up top 4 at Mid-Ohio last Thursday. So Romanidis is on fire right now. Someone to watch, and another one to watch watch as well, Eduardo Leo, his best starts on an oval so far this season, so making use of the tracks that he's not necessarily comfortable with. There's Robert Malechka just inside of the top 5. We'll keep an eye on him and his teammate Kraus. They're always strong on these ovals, and they easily can dominate. But again, everyone all single file. It's all about making the moves early, but at lap 5, things have already strung out.
And, you know, when it comes to this sort of a race, assuming we get a relatively lengthy green flag run, you're going to want a car that performs well over 60-odd laps or so, right? To try and stretch the fuel out potentially and give yourself a bit more of a margin. And so it's hard to really take too much, you know, stock of the speed that we're seeing right now. By the time we get to lap 30, going to be very interesting. Have the trends moved around? Our private label Team Hype just biding their time right now. You can see the train extends all the way back effectively to 28th position. We've got all 28 cars within around 6 seconds or so. Everyone on top of one another, and this is where those in-car tools, the ARBs, the weight jackers, really come into play as we check in the fight with two teammates. David Toth, Ricardo Rico, Diogo Pinto behind them, trying to run them down.
And these were two guys, Arjuna, that started this season pretty well for themselves. They were inside the top 12, which is the eligibility cut line to make next season's edition of this series. But they have since fallen out. Couple poor finishes, specifically from Rico, and he's bounced out to 18th in the point standing. So him and his teammate in David Toth, a Hungarian up front of him, they really do need a good run and several positive finishes over the next several weeks. Ricardo Rico bounces on the inside. He'll look underneath Toth. Should be a clear-cut move made for the pass. That is P8. Ricardo Rico getting it done.
And so always interesting as well to keep in mind, iRacing's got a spotter. Some of these teams and drivers have got additional human spotters helping them out as well. And so maybe the team calls helping there. Josh Chin on his box is Adam Blocker. We'll talk more about that in a couple of moments' time. Look at this up the inside. Is there going to be a move forthcoming? Can Rico make it another position gained? Elliot Veyron finished on the podium at Indianapolis. Not necessarily his forte. Shows his strength on the outside.
And this is also one of those tracks where the high line kicks in quite a bit. We talked about that a lot, specifically at Iowa, because that track is always known to be a multi-groove breeder where you can use theoretically any lane and make strength work on the exit of the corner. It almost goes the same way here at Gateway. You can't go up as high because there isn't as much grip up there, but you can use that secondary lane specifically to play some defense. That's exactly what Veyron did there. Just let Rico have the inside, pinch him down low. You don't want to get your left side tires on the curbing, so Rico tried to get out of that, and thus Veyron was able to hold on to the spot. That's what we're going to be able to see over the course of the run as these tires wear. That higher line will start to kick in, and our first caution is out. A huge crash off turn 2.
And wow, there's some big names that I said would have to fight their way forward. Don't think they'll get their chance. Jacob Oster's on the flatbed, so's Jason Brophy, straight to pit lane alongside of Jose Soria. And so we don't even get 12 laps in before the pace car is back out. We'll slow things down for the first time today. Can't wait to take a look at this replay, because the two ends of the track being so different means your car setup needs to adjust for both. You've got to be on top of your in-car adjustments as well and proactively in front of the tools. Was a bit of a stack up. Was there some aggression maybe brewing? Find out in a few moments time though, as Michael Romanidis just waits to try and pick up the pace car. And there you go. Sitting now and not expecting many drivers to come down towards the pit lane. One more driver heads down, by the way, UC Katia. So 4 cars, Kenneth, getting tangled up.
Yeah, a ton of guys getting big-time damage off of this. And it started with Jacob Oster, who was running 28th at the time of the caution. He was on the outside of turns 1 and 2. When we dial up the replay, we'll give you a better scope of what went down with Oster's machine. We know that Oster has been pretty strong on the ovals as of late, but this one he may not be able to escape from like he did at Indianapolis. And part of it was what I mentioned in the thought before about running the very high lane. It's very hard to do, and oftentimes you'll end up either in the outside wall or with a really slow race car off the exit of turn 2. So Oster got the first bit of that, hit the outside wall, stacked up the traffic behind him, and as soon as Jason Brophy and company got up behind him with Jose Soria, they all just stacked up and went flailing for the inside barrier really hard. And again, many heavy hitters of those guys caught up in it, and they may just be out of this race with all the suspension damage.
We'll take a look, as mentioned, in a few moments' time. Did see a couple of drivers come down the pit lane. Here we go. Love the transition, by the way. Shout out to Cisco, our producer, for throwing that one together. So up high for the green and gold of Oster, and you could just see tags the wall. Brophy runs into him, gets clobbered from behind. The Williams Esports car mixed up as well. Brendan Lichtenberg's on board would be something to watch, and guess what? Producers read my mind. Oh my day, smoke in front of you, foot planted for the most part. Hyperstar keeps out of it.
Well, Team I5G, at least half of them were able to get away from that. Oster, though, not as lucky, but it's again what I mentioned. You're way too high in 1 and 2. There's not a lot of grip up there, and you just can't make the arc down low. It's a really tight radius, turns 1 and 2 in comparison to the other end of the speedway. So when that wall juts out quite a little bit, you may end up hitting the wall, which is what Oster did, and that checkup easily can take everybody with them. So already the first caution, and I'm probably not surprised, Arjuna, to see basically no one take pit road. It's really early in this race, so you wouldn't expect guys to think about the strategy, but think about if we get a caution with like 30 or 40 laps down the road, then we'll have lots of guys consider that a little more, maybe some alternate strategies too.
I guess the only thing to think about is, are they just trying to set themselves up if there are additional cautions? Right now, the one thing that always makes these sort of races interesting when you have the threat of the safety car is the need to adapt on the fly. And so have they figured out something and calculated what they can do from further back in the field? Lights are off, we're ready to go back racing. So relatively short turnaround on the safety car periods as well. Romanides has led every lap so far. His teammate Kele Costantini has been tucked in behind him. And so let's see what happens as we tick over to lap 15 here from the Worldwide Technology Raceway. And the speed builds, the snaking will start, I'm sure, as well. But on the left side of the screen, 3 teams inside of the top 6, 3 teams effectively inside of the top 7, Kenneth.
Really good to see the diversity of the teams there, and what's funny is that most of those teams are running nose to tail with each other. They're not blended in, all mixed together. They're just either running in their own little group, whether it be first and second, and down the running order. But it was a phenomenal start by Team Cohen. Costantini was able to get a little bit away from Eduardo Leo, so not as much draft given to car number 17, and that could let the Cohen cars go away quite a little bit and make red lines trot to the front just a little bit harder down the lane. Elia Veyron, though, was in the mix of traffic. We know that Ricardo Rico had been trying to make the move on the inside. Maybe next time he'll get up high and try something in 1 and 2. Not the run that he wanted off turn 4, though.
And so I said lap 30, where we're kind of waiting to figure out long run pace, maybe extend that by maybe 5 more laps with the few laps that were run under slightly slower speed. It'll be quite interesting to see if the private label team Hype have been just sitting in the bank and waiting to cash the check in the tires that they've got underneath them right now. We'll see one switch of Firestones for the most part. The track position likely to be somewhat important. You mentioned Jacob Oster at Indianapolis, of course. We had a late race caution. Was a little bit of an interesting call for him and Brandon Traino. Did not pay off for Traino. Jacob Oster just about survived through all of it. Speaking of Team I5G, by the way, wow, I mean, Kenneth committed with his costume. Brendan Lichtenberg's gone even further.
All right, the Swift Cat look. I like it from Lichtenberg, who sits in 19th right now. I'm sure the viewers on his Twitch channel are very happy to see him in costume. And thankfully, he's just like us, Arjuna. He's in the theme of Halloween. Not many people these days sometimes get into the theme of it, especially when you've got a race like this, as contentious as it is. But nice to see Brendan in the all-black cat fit. Really cool.
I mean, that's commitment. And UC Katia has already jumped into the Twitch chat to say, oh, it's unfortunate that he's out of this race. It just means he can go and get Halloween candy and eat it. He's one of the older drivers in the series. There's no parents supervising his candy intake, that is for sure. I mentioned spotters, by the way. Go back to the story on Josh Chin very briefly. On the box for him, as Adam Blocker mentioned a couple of times this season, he is a race engineer on the number 78 Hunkos Hollinger Racing car in the NTT IndyCar Series. He brings that experience over to the sim world as well. He's just one of a handful of spotters in the field. Bobby Zelensky's on the wall for Michele Costantini. Brendan Lichtenberg's got Christopher Demerit in his corner as well. And Sam Koituk's got a couple of drivers lurking in the sim for him. One of those drivers has got the last name Verstappen.
Oh, well, do you know that name, Arjuna? I think all of us knows that name quite well. It's great when you have a name like that on the box for you. I think that gives you a little more confidence. but maybe a little more pressure too. But I really wanted to touch on for Coanda with Costantini, having a guy like Bobby Zelensky is really important, because Zelensky had the opportunity to be a part of the qualifying series, trying to get into this campaign, which unfortunately he could not, but he is a veteran in the INDYCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series. Could give some tips as Ricardo Rico dials up the inside again to Elliot Veyron, same part of the track where Veyron can leverage the high side. No dice for the Drago Racing entry.
Let's hope we get some wheel-to-wheel action starting to build and bubble. It has been relatively sedate since the restart, if we're being totally honest. I think drivers have very much realized they can't afford to put too many foots wrong over the course of this race. You go beyond the limit of the tire one too many times and you'll find yourself really starting to fall off the cliff. Now Veyron, he's not really defending as hard as maybe he wants to, and yeah, I think he's just going to give up that spot. Rico's been really on a charge so far. 3 positions gained so far. He is not the biggest mover. That goes the way of Brendan Lichtenberg, mainly just for staying out of trouble after not setting a qualifying time. So Rico's been the one up towards the front, really making things happen.
Well, Rico is one of those guys that has been pretty strong when it comes down to the ovals in some cases, and can be very strong when he starts to put on the pressure very early in the going. And that was the move he had to make, right? Not in 3 and 4 where the corner's a little longer and you have more chances for the outside car to cut you off. Ricardo Rico said, I'm going to send it turn 1. We have to brake, go down to at least 4th or 3rd gear, depending on the setup, and I'm just going to wash in front of you and see what you do from there. I'm sure Veyron had that hint in mind. Look at this battle from 14th on back. Sort of surprised Arjuna to see the apex duo of Berryman and McEwen this far back in the field to start. Remember how strong they were at Iowa, and barring the pit strategy call they made, which forced them to pit with a little under 5 laps to go, I mean, they were in contention to potentially win that race and take a 1-2 away. Surprised that they're this back early, but potentially a better strategy call they have in mind with Sotamuto and Tamas Simon behind them.
You know, that was a race where it was working until it didn't work, right? And in some ways, it was about the pressure that was built up behind. Remember, Rob Malechka was the one that was hunting and got them to push that a little bit harder, but Rob couldn't pass. He burned up his tires, gave Phil the chance to try and take victory. So there's so much to think about. Berryman's gone on his outside though, a really feisty Sotamuto. Not quite sure if this is going to end into turn 1 though. Berryman's got plenty of experience on the ovals. Sotamuto though, back after being at the Motorsports Games last week, just missed out on a medal. He's up to 15th now.
Really good progression from the Japanese driver. Muto looking for his first top 15 Arjuna since Long Beach, where he finished P6. Look at this power move outside, 3 and 4, and that's 2 for 1 there on the Apex teammates. Muto is on the move early, but to talk about strategy and how Iowa ended Arjuna, it goes to what Gustavo Ariel told us after the race in Mid-Ohio last week. When I asked him about the oval stretch of the calendar, he told me that with the strategy on ovals, it can change from one lap to the other, and he was sort of insinuating that cautions had a big deal in that, and that's what forced Apex into that strategy, because the yellows came out the way they did, forced them to come down pit road at their elected time, which ultimately bit them at the end. But great move for Sotamuto there, up to 14th and already making ground on Jordan Caruso.
So, we are about to cross 30 laps complete. I mentioned this was right around when we may start to see the private label team hype turn up the wick. And to the outside, here comes the king of Indianapolis. He's going to try and make the move on Florian Lebigra, but into turn 1, he's going to have to be brave on the outside. It's not worked for a couple of drivers, but Rob Malechka is going to try once more. Brushes the wall, yes, loses some speed. Lebigra is going to hold on, all as up the road, Eduardo Leo starts to scamper away in 3rd spot.
And this is the point of the run to which that right front tire is starting to scream a little bit for the grip. So specifically in 1 and 2, where you're trying to carry so much speed in a tight corner, that car is going to wash up the banking and go into the wall. Malechka got it square though, so at least he didn't get away with any damage or anything, but still a close call when you make a move on the outside like that. Here comes Kraus, look on the inside for 5th. Private label team hype is looking to move in synchronization, but Lebigra holds on from the outside lane.
This is where you got to be careful if you're Kraus. Don't want to find yourself losing ground in the championship. You have to start thinking championship if you're Kraus. With just a handful of races to go and so many ovals, they'll wind it up out of turn 2. They'll look at the live point situation on the right-hand side into turn 3. 2 points gained. He moves us way forward into 5th position. And our PLTH 4th and 5th closing in on those podium spots. Also, got to give a big shout out to Ricardo Rico. Look at the pressure he's putting onto Florian Lebiger, who instantly tries to make his way past Kraus once more.
Well, it's something about the oval racing, Arjuna, to where you make one mistake, you can build traffic behind you, and specifically if you go side by side for too long, it's going to build up a long accordion list of cars that are behind. So Ricardo Rico, who had spent his time in the clean air after getting by both David Top and Elliot Veyron, said, well, let's go. He'll go to the inside here in turn 1. Ricardo Rico has already been one of the strongest movers, and here he is with a chance to enter the top 5 if he can get around Phil Kraus. Rico is making the moves, and this is all to set him up for the strategy later. We're on our longest green flag run of the race.
Quite enjoying it as well. Did note on the live points it was quite close between Eduardo Leo in 3rd, closing in on the points leader Diogo Pinto, who's buried back in 10th position. Gustavo Ariel, Redline teammate, also up there in the mix. Cooper Webster behind as well. Well, Rico almost ran into the back of Kraus there. Slightly different lines between the two drivers. But for Pinto, I mean, his worst finish this season was at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway when we went there for our oval round. Finished in 7th position. Has not been ideal, and I tell you what, those 3 Redline drivers, they got to keep an eye on the rear view mirrors. Webster very close to the wall out of turn 4, and Sotomuto looks to try and make up yet another position. Got to say, Sotomuto, one of those drivers who at Indianapolis, we saw his inexperience at the end of the race. Remember the late race restart where he was part of the caution that we got? Well, unfortunately, he admitted it was a slight mistake. And so he's learning a lot about this series. You can learn about it yourself by heading to iRacing.com/INDYCAR-esports. Still only a couple more rounds left to go. WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in 7 days' time. Then the Milwaukee Mile, our trip over to the Nashville Super Speedway, where we'll crown our champion. It's going to be really, really exciting stuff. Here comes Muto, though, closing up to Cooper Webster.
And caution out for the second time. Xavi Ros, the Spaniard, with heavy rear wing damage, is spun around at the back straightaway. There's a bit of an opening there for the wall. I believe that's for the safety trucks to go through. Not usable in iRacing, but for Xavi Ros, got a bit of the contact, and this is where the strategy gets fun. We'll have drivers on pit road shortly.
Our virtual AMR safety team, just as efficient as they are in the real world, and so they will not have to be called into action here today. Xavi Ross, just the rear wing dangling on his car, but he will bring it back down to pit lane of his own accord. Now, this could very well trigger a flux of pit stops. So, what are you being told in your ear? Who on the wall is going to try something different? There you go. The camera shot shows Romanidis and Costantini will stay out 39 laps into the race. Leo, Milechka, Kraus, and then a whole bunch of other drivers behind say, you know what, it's time for fuel, 4 Firestone tires, 40 laps into this race.
Perhaps the Coenda cars might want to cut this race in half. We'll take a second look at what happened with Xavi Ros there off turn 2. I mentioned how the right front tire usually is screaming for grip at this point of the race. The rear tires can be in the same place as well. That's what happened. It lit up off the exit of the corner. Xavi Ros goes for the simple spin, but in the attempt to save it, just bounces off the wall. And a look from Jeff Drake, you'll see the car goes sideways, and thankfully no one else was involved in this incident. Jeff Drake had a lot of space to maneuver around, but Xavi Ros, unfortunately, with a ton of time he'll have to spend on pit road. But back to the Coenda cars, they may elect to go halfway home and try to pit around lap 50 to 54. That is banking, of course, on a possible other yellow flag that comes out in the future, but it seems like that's the idea. Not sure if it's the great call, though, right now.
It's an interesting call, that's for sure. You can see who all have elected not to pit. Now, we do have those trio of drivers who stay out after pitting under the first caution of the race, Chin, Drake, and Munoz, but everyone else into the pit lane. And not really too many changes in the running order through the field. They basically exit the lane as they entered. When are we going to see, though, these Coanda drivers down to pit lane? It is going to drop them a full lap down. That is the danger of pitting here at the Worldwide Technology Raceway. And it's probably why a whole slew of the other drivers elected to come down to pit lane. Maybe Kawanda are gambling here on another safety car inside of 20 laps. And I guess, you know, that's not a bad call, Kenneth. What do we always say? Cautions breed cautions.
They can breed and multiply very, very quickly. But that wasn't the trend off of first yellow. We maybe thought that at some point we would get another quick yellow off the restart, but it just didn't happen. We ended up in another semi-long green flag run that ended under caution like here with Xavi Ros. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree fully with this call by the 5 cars, 4 of them Coanda machines, to stay out this long, because like you said, you can easily fall a lap down if you have to pit under green. And so it's a big risk they have to call. However, if you're looking at the devil's advocate here, for those who are staying out right now, there is a good chance that if we do go longer into a green flag run, these guys can hold on to their positions for a lot longer than you think. You probably won't be able to bleed off that much because the fresh tire cars that we've seen here before in the qualifying series took a little while just to go into the rest of the traffic and make the moves.
And if you're looking at all of this thinking, it looks fun, I'd love to get in on all of this, well, head to iRacing.com today. New memberships are 40% off and every day is race day. Start your iRacing career. Who knows? You could be on the grid for the 2025 INDYCAR ButtKicker iRacing Pro Series and mixing it up as one of the best 33 drivers in this Dallara IR18. And we'll show you at some point some onboards of this car, exactly what it looks like. It is one of the best cars in iRacing in my totally unbiased opinion, totally unbiased, and highly recommend that you jump in and try it. There's a reason why so many of these top drivers from Redline Coanda who have little experience of ovals are here in this series. It's a fun car and they have thrived with this challenge. We're ready to go back racing though. We're about to find out, was it a good call? Was it a bad call? We have seen it's difficult to pass, does not mean it's impossible. First car on fresh tires, nestled back in 8th position and with some work to do. Fantastic look up above here at this Worldwide Technology Raceway, and you can really see the 2 ends of the track being so unique, so different. This place is fantastic. The fireworks go off in the real and virtual worlds every time IndyCars race around here. Romanidis has led every lap so far. It's a big launch as he gets back underway, 42 complete, and at the back of the field a couple of drivers already poking out of line, and it's Rob Malechka to try and make his move on Eduardo Leo. The drivers that came down pit lane already starting to mix it up between the 2 of them. Doesn't see them switch around though as they rumble down the back straightaway.
Robert was looking for it before the entry of turn 1 and tried to get another one in track position, but just could not do it. You have to get a better run into the first corner just to make that happen, but problem is they're already falling off from everybody in front of them. That was the idea for those that stayed out. They can pull away a little bit and hold the fresh tire cars off for a bit. Here comes Rico, inside look on Kraus, lights up the rear tires, and Labigra charges down low.
And simultaneously, Kraus gets a great exit. He'll take advantage to look to the inside of his teammate. PLTH will coordinate here surely and figure out who they want to lead and charge in this phase of the race. Malechka, though, holds strong behind them. Does seem as though for the time being, Rico will hold off Labigra as well. Look at the power move around the outside. Doesn't slip too far off the groove as well. Gets the power down nicely and in the draft holds on to the position. A lot of fighting, no change effectively. Eduardo Leo saves a bit of his tires, builds up a bit of a margin. There are some cars though that I wonder now, have they just gone into saving mode? Because Eduardo Leo's fallen off the back here of Jeff Drake. He's almost 1 full second behind.
Yeah, he may be just conserving his tires early on. You may see that just to give them a little more longevity moving forward. They obviously want this race to go into a long green flag run until the end because they'll hope that those guys up front will pit, they'll fall a lap down, and even if they have fresh tires to unlap themselves and maybe get a shot at the pack, the guys who are saving their tires now will have overall better tire life when this race crunches down to the end. So Leo may not want to push the big red button early on in this run, so it's a pretty good decision to keep your calm. Only problem is private label Team Hype is right behind him, so if they try to make any moves, Leo will be under a ton of pressure as Jeff Drake heads on the outside. Beautiful move on Leo to keep ahead. Actually, that's another red line car that he's getting around. Sam Kreitzer, who's 2 laps down.
And I think that's why the gap's grown to Leo, at least at this stage of the race. Just seeing that Sam Kreitzer, who did get tangled up in the first caution and then also had a penalty to serve as well, And really been an unfortunate day for him. Now, Eduardo Leo's mirrors field. He's both looking forward and behind. Almost brushes the wall off of turn number 4 as we close in on lap number 50. We're almost halfway through this race already. And remember, still waiting for the front 5 to come down onto pit lane. 4 of those drivers representing the purple and orange of Coanda. It's just David Toth, the Drago Racing driver, joining them on that slightly unique strategy. Again, just a reminder, that is Sam Coitert that's just continuing to hold up the likes behind, but potentially just helping out in terms of traffic. It's going to look to the outside. I tell you what, this is the thing about being a couple of laps down. In IndyCar racing, you're not necessarily always just going to sit down. If you think you're faster, you're going to try and get on through. Coitert's got fresh tires, I think. Not quite working just yet.
Well, but he's got Leo and company behind, so as they conserve their tires, maybe Coitert is playing some games here. He's forcing Jeff Drake's hand to play a little defense. It's slowing them overall down, and it can help Eduardo Leo get back in this chase, at least take one position away from those who have stayed out up until now. But for guys like Drake and the guy in front of him, Joshua Chin, both of them are buried deep in the point standings, at least 25th or worse, with no shot right now and making next year's series if they're not able to push their way into the top 12. So it's a why not strategy, and Coitert's strategy worked a little bit. Leo goes by, Malechka gets inches away from the wheels of Coitert, who continues the fight on the outside.
And you've got to be careful here. You're 2 laps down. I don't really know why you continue to fight. Blue flags are informational, yes, but you're not going to make any friends this way, that's for sure. It's helped Ricardo Rico lunge up the inside of Phil Kraus. This is where that decision to pit from these drivers when Coanda didn't pit is really precarious. Oh my days, Ricardo Rico lunges from another postcode. He's come from St. Louis up the inside. Now it doesn't work out, but it's audacious, and I tell you what, inexperience probably helping him out as well to not realize how dangerous that could be.
And Rico was mid-save in 1 and 2. He caught the seam with the left side tires on the inside of the racetrack, and he had to hang on to the IR-18 for dear life. And they are still in this hot pursuit to get around the 2-lap down car of Coitert. Private label Team Hype is probably frustrated to see this happen, and it's sort of suffering from success if you're Redline. You could take out Coitert if these guys get a little antsy. Thankfully, private label Team Hype is able to get around, and Ricardo Rico had a bit of a moment there trying to swap down for position. Coitert not giving this one up yet in the mid-pack.
Yeah, and I feel for Sam, but he is 2 laps down and no one is battling with him. So I do feel again at some point he needs to just figure this out. Jeff Drake's 3 wide. He must have hit the wall, and he's riding the wall right now as well. This is uncomfortable. He will want to try and maybe get down to pit lane, I'm assuming. It does now promote. It releases Leo, Malechka, Kraus to try and close up to the top 6. Those that have not come down to pit lane for at least one time today in some cases. Josh Chin, of course, did pit slightly earlier. Drake seems to be back up to speed. He's holding off Pinto up to turn 3.
And also, Arjuna, this side-by-side action that we've been seeing with Coitert, Drake, and the rest of the field has allowed the line to grow extensively. We had maybe 4 or 5 cars in this fight. You have to go all the way back to 16th place, Sotamuto, to find the last car that is in the draft of this long line. So as all of that was going down with Leo and company trying their best to get around, it seems like there is something brewing with the rest of the field. Romanidis from the race lead is on pit road with 52 laps to go.
And that's interesting because I really feel there's a caution right around the corner with the way that some of those drivers are playing. That is a sorry sight. The state of some of those Dallara IR-18s, much worse for the wear. He's going to go a full lap down. We'll figure out how valuable 4 fresh Firestone tires are. As soon as he's up to speed, we'll see if he feeds out into some clean air as well. Jeff Drake still holds off Pinto, Ariel, and Webster behind. And I think if you look at the live point situation right now, which is not necessarily representative, again, remember, still waiting for 4 to come down to pit lane. it's still looking very, very promising if you are Diogo Pinto, even being down in 12th as next Coanda driver to pit lane. Here comes Jordan Caruso.
And it is the rest of the Coanda field. Costantini, Veyron, and the tertiary car of Caruso here. It looks like they were using Romanidis as the tester. If you're in communications there of Coanda, you may be just telling Romanidis there, you're burning the most fuel, you're up in the front of the field in clean air, come down pit road, give us a test of what it's like to pit in the middle of this green flag run. We'll follow you down the lane. There's David Topp, who also stayed out as long as he could. He's entering pit road now. Joshua Chin will take over the race lead, and it's a question of who else will pit. The answer, just one. So Eduardo Leo has this strategy in the bag with no caution that came out after the last restart.
Now remember, Josh Chin did pit under the first caution, so it will come down to pit lane at some point, I would say, within the next maybe 20 laps or so. Everyone, I think, does owe us a pit stop unless you are saving fuel. And Josh Chin is a prodigious fuel saver in his own regard. I've raced in some endurance races against Josh, done fuel saving myself, and been amazed at how Josh has gone 2-3 laps longer on a stint. He's pretty good at lifting off on that right foot. You can see the margin back to Eduardo Leo, though. He's going to try and grow it, I think, at this stage. Doesn't want to deal with the Team Redline driver. Ideally would like his teammates to pass Leo before Leo catches him. Kraus and Malechka switch around, and it's time to go on the hunt. Here comes Kraus in the 99. A championship is on the line if you're in the private label Team Hype camp here.
Yeah, they've got all the ovals to their benefit. We know how strong they are on that category of the schedule, so it's about them maximizing the points as much as possible here. And it's a problem knowing how good Redline has been all night long. You look at Florian Lebiger, who's hanging around in P6. You look at Diogo Pinto, who may cap off a top 10 from 8th place. Eduardo Leo, who's that 2nd place car. They've done okay right now on this oval, which is not good enough for private label Team Hype, who are only too strong in the fight for the championship. So with 44 laps to go, Kraus and Malechka are locked in trying to catch Leo, and as they've separated between themselves, the gap to Leo only remains at 0.6 of a second.
Not too much communication between the teammates right now, and I've got to say that is a busy room of drivers. You've got Jason Brophy still in there after his crash earlier on in the night. Jeff Drake, Josh Chin, Phil Kraus, Rob Malechka, and Adam Blocker and Alexander Van der Sant, the two spotters, the crew chiefs effectively on the box helping them out. They'll be the ones probably doing the most talking as we ride with the 99 private label Team Hype machine. Remember, came into this race knowing winning all 3 of the ovals would guarantee that he is no more than 7 points behind the championship leader Diogo Pinto come the end of the season. 7 more points that can be found through bonus points, leading laps, leading the most laps. And so that's why there's some importance for him to try and make his way past Eduardo Leo sooner rather than later. That gap's coming down. Last lap, over 1/10 of a second shaved in the fight for $50,000.
They are going for the cash. And for Kraus, in this sense, he almost started this season from behind the 8 ball. He had 2 finishes at the start of this season, 29th at the Indy GP, 13th at Long Beach. Just wasn't to cut it when you compare to a lot of the Redline guys who started either in the top 5 and finished there or ended up winning the race. But as soon as he got the win at Iowa, that's where things really turned around. The spark came alive for Kraus, and all of a sudden, he's been able to capture a top 10 in every race since, including 4th at Indianapolis just several weeks ago. He is inching on Kraus, or on Leo rather, and the gap is only down to 0.2 of a second, so maybe off turn 4, Kraus could have something to say in turn 1.
It's building, it's brewing, and it's bubbling. Jeff Drake's down to pit lane. Expect Josh Chin in sooner rather than later. I think the window is about 60 laps or so. So these drivers are going to have to pit within 10 laps at the end of this race. It is, though, a swap for what effectively is the net race lead. Eduardo Leo doesn't fight it. Josh Chin's down to pit lane, and so we cross over onto lap 70. 39 laps to go, and guess what? PLTH on top once more. The hype with Phil Kraus. Eduardo Leo still sticking in his mirrors.
What a move by private label Team Hype. Chin stayed out as long as he could until he saw Kraus on the inside and said, that is my cue to exit stage left. He went to the entrance of pit road. He's out of the strategy call for now. He is good on fuel, obviously, but for the rest of these guys, this is a proper setup for what will be the final pit stop in this race. We know you can at least go at least 49 or more laps on the racetrack, so we know that it will be very close for those who just came down pit road with Team Coanda and these guys who are staying out right now. But a wonderful challenge from Kraus. Leo, though, is still hanging there, at least within striking distance, so this is far from over.
We haven't talked about Coanda very much since they came down to pit lane. I will tell you that Josh Chin has emerged right in the midst of Romanidis, Costantini, and Veyron, and so straight into a fight. Be curious to see 37 laps from now, will they be up towards the front and in the mix as well? Now, coming into the season, I kind of thought these were two drivers to keep an eye on in the championship fight. It's proving to be that way, but like Kenneth's already talked about, Phil Kraus has had his struggles. Eduardo Leo won the first round of the season, had technical issues and involved in a crash at Long Beach and Barber, and Iowa was 11th for him. So he's only finished 2 races inside of the top 10. Just happens to be, it's been on the top step of the podium on each of those occasions. What did we talk about earlier on this season? You need consistency, though, to probably be up towards the front at the end of the championship. And this is what you need. If you're going to get consistency, get it at the end of the season, right? You don't want to be swinging, batting 500 at the start of the season. You want to be batting 500 during the World Series, Kenneth.
Well, but the stakes are getting higher here for even Leo, a driver who's been so good all season and has already won 2 races. He's the only guy with two wins this season. But again, those 2 finishes outside of the top 20 hampered him dearly, and the same for Kraus, because you look at guys like Jogo Pinto and Gustavo Ariel, both of them have either almost all of the races in the top 10, and Ariel has 1 finish outside of the top 10 in 15th Indianapolis, but they have been the example, the proper example of consistency in every single race, first to now. So if you're Leo and Kraus, you may have to step it up. You might want to start winning more races and gaining more of those points, thinking about it, because as long as these guys continue to have decent enough races, maybe they don't need the wins because they'll have all the points in their back pocket.
And speaking of, let's go over to 2 of the drivers still technically in the championship. And Cooper Webster almost ran over his teammate Gustavo Ariel into turn number 1 there. Still with Sotomuto behind them, who, by the way, 8 positions gained so far. Brendan Lichtenberg is plus 13, the biggest mover, but only because, remember, no qualifying lap time for the Hyperstar. Muto definitely has been one to watch as Webster down to the pit lane. Is that because he doesn't think there's a benefit to going to the end of the fuel tank on older tires? Is he trying to maybe just maximize the pace and maximize the use of the Firestone tires that he'll get in the pit lane? No tire set limits, remember, to speak of. 32 laps to go, though. A caution right now, Kenneth, puts him out of the race.
That would take everything out of the equation for him, but Webster maybe is the test mule here for Redline in the sense that he's going to pit now and give himself about 30 or so laps to chase the rest of the field down, get his lap back, and when they all have to come down, then he'll have the track position to leverage with. And this almost feels like the primary and alternate strategies we have on the road courses, right to the point where you have to account for the fall off late in the going. So here on the ovals, you can pit on this long green flag run, giving yourself enough time to cycle back to the front of the field and give yourself a chance, because if you miss it by at least a lap or 2, your race could alter from race win to maybe an outside top 10 finish. And look at the guys already punching their way through the field. Josh Chin, who's a lap down, is in 17th. David Toth is 16th, a lap down, but they are on the route to unlap themselves with everyone else that have come down pit road.
And so watch Josh Chin here behind Gustavo Ariel. So this is 8th position versus 17th, but old tires versus fresh tires. And you might as well be standing in quicksand if you're Gustavo Ariel. You're going nowhere anytime soon compared to what the fresh Firestone tires can give you. The purchase, the grip on the surface here at this Worldwide Technology Raceway. Next up in the line, of course, is Sotomuto, who slides the car high up out of the groove in through turn 4. And watch Josh Chin, goes down low, shows himself in the mirror as a Florida native, and last time by, just marginally faster than the leader. That's what Josh Chin is trying to do after starting down in 15th position, is keep himself in contention for a relatively decent finish at the end of this race. One thing that has been on my mind, but is becoming more of a reality as we get to the end of the season. November the 14th, we have our race at the Milwaukee Mile. But Gustavo Ariel, Eduardo Leo, and Michael Romanidis are all going to be in New Orleans getting ready to race in their very first real-world racing event in the Prodigy 3 Championship. And so, let's assume 2 of those drivers are inside of the championship fight still, right? Eduardo Leo and Gustavo Ariel. They've got a pivotal race to work their way through, Kenneth. Looking at that point situation, look at the 17 and the 21, even Romanidis back in 11th in that 53 machine. They're going to be dealing with that emotion, right? The pressure of getting ready to go racing in the real world for the very first time. Also while trying to compete here in this series on a sim ring that maybe isn't comfortable for them, in an environment that maybe they're not familiar with, and with the pressure of fighting for $50,000. I'm glad they're the ones that are racing and we're up here in the commentary booth.
We have less stress when we only have to talk about mathematics, which, I mean, we do get stressed about it too because we're not the best at it, but that is true. And in racing, it's just as much of a physical game as it is a mental game. You have to think mentally about your mindset, how much anxiety you feel, how you deal with that anxiety, and how you deal with those setbacks. And, you know, just like the guys of the INDYCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series when they had to take the real-world rigs on a stage in front of a crowd at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for the championship, it's almost like those guys, right? They're ready to race in a real-life car. They're scared about what could happen. They're worried about their performance. And then here they have to go when they're trying to fight for $20,000 and an INDYCAR ButtKicker iRacing Pro Championship. So it is all about how they can respond to that, especially for guys like Eduardo Leo, a 17-year-old, so young. You've got to deal with all of that mental pressure so early on.
You can see a shake of the head there from Luke McEwen. Don't think that's for the Apex Racing team. They will be thrilled, but I don't think they should be disappointed either. They qualified down, of course, outside of the top 10. Still have a chance to be up there at the end, but we'll see if they can figure out some magic on strategy after we mentioned a couple of times Iowa did not go their way. Luke McEwen's tongue sticks out for a couple of seconds. They're always interesting to see the little ticks and whatnot that drivers have in their sim rigs. Wouldn't see that in the real world, of course, behind the helmets. Tamish Simone puts the pressure on in 11th position. And then Dan Amor, the Apex Racing Academy driver, who remember was leading at Iowa before he crashed out and brought out a caution. He's bouncing back and running in 12th.
You know, there are a lot of stories from Iowa about heartbreaks and last-to-ditch moments that have changed the complexion of the race. For Amor, we thought he could be dominant, then all of a sudden catches the lap car Costantini and around he went into the wall. It's good news that Amor is here fighting for a top 15, and I'd say even with the frustrations of McEwen and Berryman, who haven't had the strongest race and haven't had the upper hand, McEwen definitely will be relieved to have a decent finish tonight because he's finished the last two, crashed out 28th and 27th. How about our first pit call from inside the top 5? Rob Malechka in with 20 laps to go.
And again, they all have to pit inside of the front 15 right now. The question is, do you come in early and try and use the Firestone tires? Cooper Webster, as an example, is still stuck behind Michele Costantini, Michael Romanidis, and Elliot Vera on the 3 Coanda drivers. So the fresh tires for him haven't worked out in the way that he was hoping for. For Robert Malechka, is he hoping a bit of an undercut can get him the launch here on Kraus and Leo? It's going to be very interesting. We'll find out at some point down the line. Check back in, though, with Webster. Rips the high line. Not going to work out for him this time by. And as he jinks down low for a moment, just avoids running into the back of the purple and orange machine in front. Should mention that we were wondering, speculating, why Cooper Webster was missing in action last week as the championship leader. A former teammate Jordan Caruso is going to slide up the inside and make his move. But Webster was testing, getting ready for the Macau Grand Prix, where he's going to be racing in the 3rd week of November. Very exciting news for Cooper, but it has put him slightly on the back foot in the race for the championship. Here comes Kraus to pit lane.
And that gives Eduardo Leo the race lead, so that'll change things. Redline will stay out at least another lap. Ricardo Rico is going to come in. And big note for Rob Malechka, who came down pit road about a lap and a half ago. He is jumping Costantini, Veyron, Romanidis, Caruso, and even Cooper Webster. So despite pitting from 5th and despite the cycle going all over the place, Malechka still was able to hold on to track position. And here is the 2nd place car, the Frenchman, Labigra, coming in this time.
And so impressive. Eduardo Leo clearly, once he was passed for the lead, net lead I should say, has saved some fuel, saved some tires, and he's trying something different. This is what you want to see from a driver inexperienced on the ovals. These are the drivers, though, technically, with the net lead of the race. Josh Chin and David Topp. This has just seen a switch around of position. David Topp has got 10-lap older tires in the PLTH, the private label team hype number 93, that purple and black machine that now is starting to break clear and run away. Florian Lebigra is going to drop out significantly behind these drivers. He is going to be behind the likes of Costantini, Veyron, and mired in with the likes of Ricardo Rico. What happens, though, with Eduardo Leo? Can he emerge alongside of Phil Kraus and Rob Malechka? Locks up the left front, but slows it down just in time.
Well, you got to look at the reference point here. Philip Kraus and Robert Malechka, they're 13th and 14th here as they've cycled out. They are catching Toth and Chin. It is still a pretty big distance they have to cover. It's about half a straightaway that they have to work with because there are two of the cars right here in Jogo Pinto and Sota Muto. Pinto decides it's his time to enter pit road. Muto will stay out. He'll lead at least one lap here from Gateway. And it's all about how Kraus and Malechka can stay up front or whether they can even go. There's a crash on pit road.
Xavi rose backwards. Remember, he was already a lap down at that point, so it's not going to cause any issues, but it shows how difficult it can be. Eduardo Leo out in front of Phil Kraus. This is important. Redline have taken back over track position in that squabble between the two drivers. Watch Malechka rip around the outside of Jaden Munoz, who's a lap down as well. That's Sotomuto, the race leader in the 68, who's going to hold up Rob Malechka very slightly, but keep an eye out on pit lane now for the rest of the drivers still coming down. There was contact, we're hearing, for Gustavo Ariel and Luke McEwen.
Oh, that will be tough for both of them who were running inside the top 10 at the moment that they had to come down pit road. That could easily alter their race big time, but keep an eye on Muto, how long he's willing to stay out. He's got 58 lap old tires, so there has to be a moment where he has to pit. Here's a moment on the brakes. Ariel and McEwen tangle, huge jump off 4 tires off the ground there for Ariel.
And one thing that we've noticed is a lot of these stops coming in late have been fuel only. Eduardo Leo has taken on only fuel. Phil Kraus has already passed him. It was not the call to not take 4 Firestone tires. They have taken too much use already. They don't have the grip. Look how slow Eduardo Leo is. Out of turn 2, the 17-year-old in the 17, looking in his rearview mirrors as Rob Malechka builds behind.
The distance, well, at least the difference between those two in lap time, Malechka set at 25.7, Eduardo Leo about half a second slower. That's how much it is, and everyone comes down pit road. Thomas Simon, Sota Muto are in. There's Malechka diving. He may hit the rear wing of Eduardo Leo off turn 2. This is getting real sketchy for 5th place with under 10 laps to go.
And he needs to go high. Keep an eye out, by the way, up front as well, because Phil Kraus is closing on the back of David Topp and Josh Chin. Yes, Brendan Lichtenberg leads, but he owes us a pit stop. He's 58 laps into his run. He's asking for just a little bit too much. He is running slowly. He's not going to be in contention for the race lead, you would assume, given that last lap alone, about 0.6 of a second was bled off, and here he comes down to pit lane. Kraus has already passed Topp. Now it's PLTH 1 and 2, and surely teammates aren't going to hold each other up here, knowing the stakes for the championship. This is exactly what Phil Kraus would want to see if he had painted out the story of this race. 3:10 still yet to close, but it is very much team hype running strong at Gateway.
And the canvas for many of the drivers, specifically for Redline, are falling apart. It is maybe over for them inside 8 laps to go, but this could be the pivotal pass for the race lead. Kraus, who had spent the majority of this season trying to get back on track, dials up the inside for the race lead with 7 to go. He's got it.
And the teammate doesn't fight. He knows the stakes. The fight for $50,000 is really reaching its turning point. Next week from the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, road course racers better maximize their points advantage because it's a third oval. It's a third oval with PLTH on top and a second one in which Phil Kraus will be the one that will walk away on top. It has been a remarkable race so far. We are not done just yet. And what did we say at the start of the show, Kenneth? every single oval race has finished under caution so far.
Well, there could be a last scare here, but the good news is that in IndyCar rules, the race will end under caution, so the field will be frozen unless Kraus has some sort of drastic situation happen. If a yellow were to fall, then that would take him out. But for the most part, if he's okay, then he will be the race winner anyway. And there is a threshold. It is around here to where if a caution does come out, this race will finalize. How about the battle for 13th? Thomas Simone, who has picked up a top 15 run up until now. Peter Berryman, they're both jumping. Jogo Pinto, who will swap to the outside. And how about the wonderful crossover? Simone tries to break the ankles of Pinto down in turn 3.
Now, Thomas Simone also did not take tires, but I think we are just once again seeing that inexperience. A road course racer might see 15 laps or so left to go and think, you know what, my tires can go enough. The drivers that have done enough speedway racing in this Dallara iRacing know the amount of load they put through their tires. They know they cannot afford to risk that. It's worth taking 4 seconds longer in the pit stop to gain 15 maybe over the course of those final 15 laps if you are lucky. We are very much, though, crossed the point of no return. Phil Kraus well and truly clear up front, but Eduardo Leo pivotally, Kenneth, still in 4th position.
You know, he's one of those guys that has a top 10 in the last 2 races of this season. 6th at Indianapolis, then the win in Mid-Ohio last week that really propelled him to the top 3 in the championship standings as his teammates start to fall away with their finishes under strategy. He's the last one left. He is loose, though, out of turn 2, and Ricardo Rico's there. Caution flag is out, and it's Xavi Ross into the wall with Michele Costantini. Thankfully for Kraus, that should end it here from Worldwide Technology Raceway.
Oh my goodness. Michele Costantini on Halloween. I mean, it's been a terrible season already. Of course, it was going to be spooky, but as much as it's a bit of an anticlimax once again at the very end, there's no stopping the momentum train for Team Hype. Once more, they'll win on the ovals. It's 3 for 3 to dominate the speedway proceedings so far. And Phil Kraus, with a small smile for the first time today, knows exactly what this represents. One step closer to being in that championship fight all the way to the end of the season at Nashville. And after Eduardo Leo 7 days ago put himself into the history books as the first repeat winner in the INDYCAR ButtKicker iRacing Pro Series, this week it's the turn of Phil Kraus. 2 wins this season, and as we make our way into the closing stages, what more can you say than Team Hype 1 and 2 on top?
That is, Arjuna, the 2nd time this season to which private label Team Hype have been able to accomplish a 1-2. The first was at Iowa. The common denominator, Philip Kraus, the race winner. We may have to dial up that replay on the caution that brought out with 2 laps to go. But with Philip Kraus not able to accelerate at the line at full pace, we'll do it under the pace car for the 3rd time this season as all oval races end under caution right now. Maybe not the trend we'd like to see overall, but for Kraus, he knows that at least his win is guaranteed, and this is a statement made from 6th in the point standings. He may shoot up to the top 3 before we know it.
This is, again, not exactly how we wanted the race to end, but we've still got 2 more ovals to go, let's not forget. Hopefully, at least one of those races finishes under green flag conditions. It's going to be another winning moment, though, for Phil Kraus. Before that, let's take a look at the replay off to turn 1. So Sam Coitet battling alongside of Xavi Rose. And wow, hellacious lick of contact. And then Michele Costantini out of nowhere. Spooky sight. I mean, watch the onboard. I don't even know what to say at this point.
I'd say the omen is out to get Costantini there. I mean, he was so far beyond the wreck, but he was already in that lane committed. It was hard to get out of it by the time Ross was in that crash. And so Costantini ends up in another incident scenario, and Xavi Ross gets his 2nd crash of the race. But for Philip Kraus, finally able to ring in the celebrations. He's got the treat tonight from Gateway, his 2nd W of the campaign.
And as he celebrates with that ButtKicker winning moment, we'll take a look at the race results and get ready to talk to the man himself. Again, margins not really meaning much given that we finished behind the safety car, but ultimately it's PLTH 1 and 2 Second time this season, they'll be thrilled with that. David Toth is going to be over the moon as well to grab third position and really solidify a really solid day for Drago Racing. Ricardo Rico in fifth, Eduardo Leo being sandwiched by those two machines. He'll be thrilled with the points he's got out of today. Rob Malechka may be nursing some damage to the end of the race. He's back in sixth, unable to charge his way through in the closing stages with Florian Lebigra, Sotomuto, Jeff Drake, and then Michael Romanidis, who of course put it on pole and led the majority of the opening stages. Wrong strategy call, dropping him to 10th. Peter Behrman, Jordan Caruso, Tamas Shimon, and then Diogo Pinto, Luke McEwen, and Dan Amor, all finishing in front of those that got tangled up in all sorts of shenanigans. Gustavo Ariel, Michele Costantini, Jaden Munoz amongst them. Brendan Lichtenberg does finish one lap down in 20th, but he gets a bonus point for leading a lap at least. Sam Coitert, Cooper Webster, and then Xavi Rose will finish at least within 2 laps of the leader. Elliot Vero, not quite sure exactly what happened to him to be down in 24th position with Jacob Oster, Jason Brophy, Jose Soria, and then UC Katia, all getting tangled up for the first of the cautions today. Word has just come through, by the way. Rob Malechka unfortunately put a bit too much fuel into that car. That's what caught him out. His teammate, though, no such unfortune for him. Phil Krause standing by in victory lane with Kenneth Bueno.
And he's got a mathematical shot at this INDYCAR ButtKicker iRacing Pro Series Championship. Welcome, Phil Krause, to victory lane for the second time this season. What statement do you make here tonight with the way the strategy went down, and now you've got a shot at the title this year?
Yeah, Kenneth, this was definitely a super important race for me and all of my private label Team Hype teammates, because it's another oval round. We know we have to perform on these and we have to execute, because we don't have the pace on the road courses right now, and this 3-1 skew to end the season definitely, like, after last race, that was the worst we were ever going to look in points, in my opinion, as long as everything goes to plan. And so far, we've ticked one box. We've got 2 more ovals to tick, and hopefully just minimize the bleeding at Laguna to give us the best chance possible.
And you guys had the plan, you and Rob Malechka, to pit as late as possible to cycle out where you guys did and get around Josh Chin and David Toth. What were the communications like between you and the rest of the teammates as you saw Redline and Coanda make early pit stops in the run?
Yeah, we knew Coanda had to make the early stop since they stayed out at the last yellow, but a lot of communication between me and Jason, just trying to figure out the gap, see where I'd merge out behind David and Chin, just to see like when I had to pit in order to get to them before the end of the race. And luckily, like when I pit, had a decent margin, because that late yellow, if that happened a few laps earlier, I still would have had the margin. But yeah, for sure, definitely a really interesting strategy race, which I wasn't expecting going into it for sure.
You're the second driver this season with 2 dubs on the campaign. You're going to shoot up in the point standings, and you may be in the conversation for the title later this season. Congratulations on the W. We'll see you at Laguna Seca next week.
Yep, cheers, Kenneth.
That is Philip Krause, second W of the year. We bring in Joshua Chin, who gets his best finish of the season, P2, here at Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. Josh, walk us through that strategy, and how good does it feel to get a top 3 position here at this point of the season?
Oh, it's great. I didn't think I had a shot at a podium all year. Super happy. If you asked me 10 years ago if this would be happening, I'd say there's no way. But strategy worked out great. Had the offset strategy, and it just worked out. It probably would have worked out a little bit better if Coanda hadn't stayed out, but it put me in a really good spot once I came out of pit road, just going. Tire advantage was huge, and just being able to roll the top side was massive. You know, early on, I'd try and go up high and cut it down low, but after a little bit, people kind of caught on to that when I was trying to get through the cars that were still on the lead lap and had pit. So I just started rolling top, and it worked out great.
It definitely worked out great. Plus 13 since the drop of the green flag. So you were the biggest mover all night long. And Phil Krause was talking about the 3-1 skew, mostly ovals, only 1 road course race next week. How do you prepare for those 3 specifically to try and maximize those runs at the end of the year?
I mean, those are the points opportunities I need to try and make sure I stay around for another season. Having Milwaukee's a big one. I like Milwaukee a lot. It's another track like this where you're going to be able to roll topside a little bit. So getting through Laguna solidly, top 15 I'd be happy with. We have a run like Mid-Ohio, that'd be good. It felt like Mid-Ohio, there were probably 2-3 spots that I could have gotten as well. So just have to capitalize, get better in qualifying. We haven't qualified well all year, and even today it showed. Phil started 5th and Rob started 3rd, so if we get qualifying good, we'll be in good shape for the last race of the season.
Well, I'd say tonight is a big forward step in that progression as you complete the rest of the calendar. Congratulations on the P2, Josh. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you soon at the end of the season, and we'll see you at Laguna Seca next week.
Yep, thank you, guys.
Josh Chin completes the private label Team Hype 1-2. The other guy on the same strategy as Josh Chin was David Toth, who joins us now from Drago Racing. David, first of all, congratulations on the podium. What did you see from the front end of your windshield with the strategy going on and to pit when you did?
Hey guys, yeah, I have to say I was quite lucky that there was no yellow, because I would have been left in that case. To be honest, I didn't even know where I will stand after the pit cycle, but yeah, I was full pushing. I had a very good car thanks to my lovely teammates, and you know, when Philip and Josh, when I saw them in the mirror, I knew that I have no chance against them because they were faster, pretty sure. But yeah, it was a very lucky race on my side, and finally a podium.
Your best finish of the season thus far. Final 3 left: Laguna Seca, Milwaukee, and Nashville Super Speedway. What do you make of those 3, and how do you try and capitalize in those races too?
I think we're gonna do the same work as we done now, and you know, I try to score as much points as I can, because consistency is the key here, and I want to have good results in the last 3 races as well.
Well, David, congratulations on the 3rd place finish, and 3 races left. We'll see what you can do. Congratulations again. We'll see you at Laguna Seca.
Thank you, guys.
Arjuna, that's your top 3 from the Worldwide Technology Raceway tonight.
And right, let's take a look at points. Ho, ho, ho. It's down to 6 between 3 with 3 races to go. I can see Kenneth. He's so excited. I'm excited as well. And the reality is, Phil Kraus said it best, I think. All he has got to really do next week when we head to the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, head to my neck of the woods, stay out of trouble. Make sure you minimize the points deficit to the rest of the competition, because you're going to feel mighty confident heading off to Milwaukee and Nashville, and there's $50,000 on the line.
Well, Phil told us that at Mid-Ohio, that's the worst that they were going to look in point standings, and I fear that he may be right in these last 3, because it will mean a lot knowing that he's got only 3 points between himself and Jogo Pinto, who showed a bit of rarity in the lack of pace with the strategy late in the going. But with the ovals there, I think we predicted it, that private label Team Hype, as strong as they've been, they've got chances to make waves, big ones in the championship. And now Phil Kraus and Jogo Pinto have to think about how they can separate from each other in their own ways in the final 3.
It's going to be really interesting in those final 2 oval races, right? Do private label Team Hype, in their partnership, of course, with Powerslide as well, work together to do the same thing that Redline might do, band around one of their drivers? But I think the road course, this is where things will be slightly different. It's just going to be pedal to the metal, go, 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 go. And yes, everyone talks about the corkscrew, the 6 stories of elevation change, but those that know, know. The scariest corner on this track is the one that leads up to it, the left-hander up the hill onto the Andretti straightaway. It's one that's going to send shivers down the spine of the drivers. And Kenneth, this is the last road course of the season.
Major key alert. Team Redline has to watch for this road course. They need to maximize this as much as possible, because they may get eliminated from the championship or have a harder time in the last 2 if they cannot complete this. We've seen miracles before here at Laguna Seca. It's a wonderful racing circuit out in Monterey, so I'm sure it's going to be a blast when we get down there.
And well, we had a blast here in the shadow of the Gateway Arch. The Worldwide Technology Raceway always delivers 108 laps. Yes, a couple of cautions, including one at the end, but it's private label Team Hype that leave on top. 3 wins in 3 races on the ovals, and 6 points splitting 3 drivers in the tail end of the championship. On behalf of our team behind the scenes, thank you so much for joining us. Our Junior Kanki Party, Kenneth Bueno, bringing you all the action. We'll see you next time from Laguna Seca.
because Dirt Racing 24 is available now.